and take other more natural remedies just to deal with the flu. But knowing that not everybody who gets that flu is going to be in any way disabled or killed by the flu itself. If we get to the level of the 1918 epidemic flu and its death rate, which they could have engineered it to be that lethal, again, it would seem that because of the pattern that the 1918 flu broke out in, that things like vitamin D and appropriate hygiene and so on, and even self-confinement would have eliminated much of the deaths. So at that level, that's basically the approach I'm going to take. I live up in the Northwest. We get a lot of clouds. We've got chemtrail activity constantly. We're just not manufacturing the vitamin D. So I'm taking 2,000 units through the summer, and then I'm going to switch to 5,000 units once we get into what we call the rainy season up here. And then I'm just going to wait and see how things go, and I'm prepared to deal with the pathogens in the form of allicin C, which is concentrated garlic. There's also sambucol, and any number of things are effective against the pathogens, the virus that theoretically is our cause for our swine flu. And I won't take the vaccine. It just doesn't make any sense.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. That's the first I heard of that high amount of vitamin D, and I'm glad you brought that up. So people should be stocking up on vitamin D.
But they've got to be careful about it, and a lot of people need, if you have other medical conditions, it's wise to just go get a blood draw and ask them to do a vitamin D analysis and see how much you got circulating, and then you can adjust the dose to suit. You got to be smart about it, that's all. But theoretically, the toxic dose is 40,000 units or greater because that's how much you would manufacture. Now, dark-skinned people of all races need to be aware that they're manufacturing less than the light skin under the best of circumstances, and certainly might need to look at supplements as a way to go.
Okay, now I'm going to jump over a little. One thing I noticed, we talk about preparing and putting food away for folks, and we're hearing anywhere from minimum of 6 months all the way up to 7 or 8 years. How long do you think people, or how much food do you think they should put away?
Well, okay. If you're talking on a what would I recommend, it's like I can give you some facts that would allow you to make some decisions, a way to frame that context. But I have to tell you my personal bias is that I'm a vegetarian of long standing. Decades here. And I don't really like the idea of food that's stored simply because I think that after a certain period of time, even canned and other processed food loses nutritive value at a level that is not good, and you could subsist on it, but you wouldn't really be alive. I mean, it would gradually degrade you. So it is feasible to look at a 7-year or 10-year storage. But I think it's much more important to have, say, 6 months or so to a year and a half, because that's consistent with what humans used to do in the pre-refrigeration time, is they'd have enough food canned for several years, because you'd never know about the next year's crop, that kind of a deal, right? But the idea of, even then, of being able to store food for 10 years was not really a good idea. And basically, my idea would be to have the ability to create food as well as have it stored. Now, it can be as simple. People need to be very inventive here, but some of the things you can understand very easily can be operated even in apartments. That you can get such things as small grow bulbs, these little 4-foot fluorescents, and you can sprout seeds. And that gives you, throughout the entire year, it gives you a source of vitamins and proteins that are staggering. For instance, if you take wheat grains and you sprout them, 4 days after they've sprouted, and you just use water to sprout them and drain the water off and so on and give them light, as soon as they've got little tiny shoots of green on the leaves, green color in the leaves, they've gained 3 times as much protein was in the seed, dozens more vitamins, and all kinds of nutrients that did not exist in that seed, and all you did was get them wet and keep them reasonably wet for 3 days. And it's a source of fresh vegetables at that level. Sort of make sense?
Oh, yeah. That's a real good tip.
Yeah, so you can do that kind of stuff, and there's literally, quite literally, perhaps thousands of different kinds of nutritive seeds that can be germinated into all different kinds of vegetables that can be eaten both as the sprouted seed or mixed in the form of, added to make your bread better value for you and so on. And say you had some canned food and you were supplementing it with fresh greens grown under those conditions, you'd probably be good to go. We could look at various stressful situations in history. Well, the one that comes to mind is the invasion of Greece and Crete by the Germans in World War II. So it was a particularly horrid situation, as had also occurred in Holland, and Holland is almost as good an example. But let's take the Greece experience for a minute. When the Germans came in the tail end of the war and took over Greece, Greece lost about a quarter of their population due to famine. The famine being caused by the Germans sucking all of the available food supply, the high-end food supply in the form of all their meat and cheeses and so on, out of the country. And so a lot of people died both of opportunistic diseases and as well as direct starvation. Their counter to that, the reason the other three-quarters did not die, was they immediately adapted to the diet of their fathers, who had been really poor, and that diet consisted of basically gleaning local plants that were native to their area that you and I might consider to be either weeds or herbs. And so they developed a diet that was based in some areas on as much as 33% of their calories came from plants they would just gather in the local hills and nooks and valleys and so on. Things like watercress all the way through to purslane, which purslane is a weed that we yank out of our yard, but it's a high protein, for a weed veggie, very high in protein and provides nutrients of other kinds. So there's various different ways of looking at it, that sort of an approach, right?
Yeah, that's great. Any other great tips like that you'd want to share?
Well, some of the things that I'm doing is I've got a grow dome, a big geodesic dome I built and covered with plastic, because I don't like the idea of the stuff that got in the chemtrails coming down on my food and then me consuming it. And so it was a lot of trouble to build the dome. It was kind of fun, a lot of bashing on steel and this kind of thing, because I live relatively close to the wallet there and couldn't afford to buy a kit or anything, so I just bought some mild steel at a local outlet and built my own. And now we have a huge amount of vegetables being grown that are chemtrail-free because they're undercover. It's also really aided in the water retention. And another thing is, with the sunlight being changed, the plastic I've got up there reduces the UVC component by 20%, and that's the component that's causing the plant burns that we've been getting. I don't know if you've seen them in your area where you guys are located, but around here in the Northwest, we'll have plants that get scorched in just a day and lose a lot of their leaves, and it's due to the different type of light coming out of the sun, which is reduced by this plastic. So, it's that kind of thing. You just have to be a little bit smart about it. Some of the other tips would be to look at these people. They wrote a really good book called 4-Season Harvest. I can't think of the author's name at the moment. The book is downstairs, so I won't take your time away to go and fetch it, but you can probably find it on Amazon and these kind of places. And basically their idea is you don't have to grow 4 seasons worth of food, but you have to be able to harvest in the 4th season. And if you're smart about it and use cheap kinds of cold frames and this sort of thing, you can harvest a huge amount of food, even in places like Denver in the middle of winter. And that food was just simply planted a long time ago relative to being harvested and allowed to grow slowly through the wintering period. And then also, if you really want to get serious about it, go and look up biointensive.org. These are the super sustainability vegan guys, and they've worked out that you can grow an entire annual human diet in 1,100 square feet if you're willing to be a vegan about it. But even if you're not, hey, it makes sense to understand some of the techniques and use them.
What was the name of that website again?
Biointensive.org. BIO intensive. It's part of the sustainability movement. That's something our data has been showing us here recently. For about, since maybe 2003 or so, we developed this concept of something that would arise just about this time in a real serious way and start getting news clippings. Now, bear in mind, we were predicting 2 or 3 years before you first started seeing any of the news clipping, we were predicting things like guerrilla gardening, where these people would start growing food in median strips in the city, that kind of thing. And that's showed up. So some of our other predictions have indeed shown up as broad social patterns, and one of them is this thing we call a SOC, S-O-C, for self-organizing collective. Now, self-organizing collective is an interesting idea because it's the ultimate in decentralized removal of control from the powers that be and returning control to the individual. And basically what it is a bunch of guys or people get together to do something. And then when they're done doing that, they go their separate ways. There's no method of control. There's no social contract to keep them together. And you might have, say, a half a dozen relatives and, 2 or 3 dozen friends and of all of the relatives, and they form this little self-organizing collective. And they may not even live together, but what they do is they pool their common knowledge and effort to aid everybody within the group, sort of a society among themselves. And then that little group may have a contact through some member to some other group, and those groups may combine into a form of a syndicate or a network and do a larger task. And you get things done this way without even relying on the central authority. And so our motto around it here basically is we do it ourselves. You know, if government shows up, they're just going to get in the way, so get them out of the way there and get this stuff done. As an example, you might want to go and read some of the stuff on Catherine Austin Fitt's website, Solari.com, SOLARI.com, and see how she's discussing reorganizing the whole planet and taking our wealth back from the powers that be and returning it to our local communities. Real smart woman, used to work for the Reagan administration, quit when she realized how corrupt it was and decided to reorganize the planet, and she's doing a real good job about it.
I knew you had a wealth of information of places I haven't heard of, and that's fantastic. One of the things I really noticed in your report was you said, I believe the term was refuse next, or
yes.
going to open revolt. I don't remember the exact wording, so I'll let you.
Well, basically what we've discovered sometime back, we have a tendency first in our data to discover larger trends and then drill down into individual examples. So the larger trend that's in operation is the transformation of our society. Within that, a slightly smaller, larger trend is the revolution meme. We're all getting really grumpy about the powers that be and the crap they're trying to pull, and so we're all a little bit irritated. And that's expressing itself as all these movements towards revolution, and the word revolution showing up all over everything from Ron Paul to, various different uses of it. And then further on down is the actual implementation of that revolution. I believe will occur this fall. We'll see outbreaks of what we're calling refuseniks. And just to borrow the old term from the Soviets, refuseniks were those people that used to refuse to go along with the Soviet propaganda machine, and they tried to live outside the system and so on. In essence, they refused to participate in the old Soviet system and actually aided over the course of about probably 30 years in bringing it down, because as more and more of them opted out, there was less slave labor and slave resources for the system as a whole to use for its support. And this will occur within our system, we believe, this fall, probably starting in September, as the government and everybody who's pushing the whole vaccine thing runs into this huge wall of resistance. And I think it's going to come around the kids. I think you're going to find a lot of people, a staggering number of people, that will just simply refuse to have their children involved.
So if you were talking directly to parents that are not sure if they should allow their kid to get these vaccinations, what would you tell them?
Educate yourself and make yourself sure. Either way, if you decide to do it, make yourself sure. Don't go into it with a happy face believing that what they tell you is true. It is not. I will let you know that right now. The government is and the press is in the habit of lying to you, and they're lying to you about this now. And then I challenge you to go prove me wrong. Do your own research and come back and prove me wrong. And I'm actually very sanguine about that. I won't be able to be proved wrong, and anybody who does their own research will come to the same conclusion that I have, that it's unsafe to take those vaccines. I won't take them. If I had children, I wouldn't allow them to